All right, Karen, and then Joy.
Oh, I just wanted to just,
While we're passing the mic around, I would just like to give kudos to the staff, Danielle and her crew, and the guys over here. They, as soon as I said I couldn't do my mic,
Problem solver.
they were on it, so
Problem solver.
it was great. So thank you very much, guys. No. Got a good crew, Ashish.
and
Jack.
I think,
Go ahead, Karen.
just to add on to that one-page summary that Dana asked for, if we can, ideally, what would be the perfect thing for it to happen at the end? You know, like the end of story. So, if you can, you know, what would be your measure? What would be your point of success?
Joy. I'm sorry, you were waiting for me. I apologize.
No, it's okay. So, you know, in your presentation and in your report, you talk a little bit about some of the areas where we're behind schedule. So looking at one of the slides that had the timeline, I think it might be the one right before this. This is the timeline that we have today. And so some of the delays and then some of the subsequent decisions around how you handle the user acceptance testing and whether it pushes out the project, those are not incorporated into this timeline that we see right now.
Yeah, this timeline is the current timeline for the project. You'll get an updated version of this in July.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, anyone else? I'm gonna let you keep that over on that side. All right. Graham, you're good? All right, John?
Nope. I got 3 minutes? No, man. Come on. Hey, how come Jack gets a video, by the way? You know, you guys get videos and we have 3 minutes to present. No video, right? All right. Good to be back. Good to see you all. I'll try to work through my presentation. I'll try not to repeat any of the things that Graham said because I think he made a lot of good points. So the first, there we go. First slide. Am I doing that one? All right. So overall, what we do, as Cassandra mentioned, we work in tandem with the IPOC, with Graham's group, and we do perhaps more technical and reporting to Cassandra and her group. A lot of the same things that we look at. Things that are going well, we always like to start with that because there's always lots of things that we end up focusing on that are not going all that well. But since the last time we met you, Graham has already talked about some of the project management items. If you'll remember in the dashboard that we have as part of our report, project management had been red for close to a year. It's no longer red, it's yellow, which is better than red. And it's because there has been a lot of focus and a lot of progress on that. The other two bullets at the bottom of the slide, I'll add just other two things that I think are very significant. One is the BD retrofit vendor. I think the last time we were here, we were saying that was one of the major issues. The good news is that contract signed. That's the new SAP implementation. Deloitte's on board. They're starting to work. So that's tremendous. And I credit the board, I think, with some of the involvement that you all had in helping that happen. The last bullet is a little bit of a kind of a two-edged sword. The good news is that the project has established a lot of focus and a lot of hard work, a lot of late nights and weekends and pizzas and additional staff as well that CGI has brought on board in the last few weeks and months to address the testing issues, because that is one of the ones that obviously that Graham mentioned and I'll mention as well. But the good news is that as well as many of the other issues that we present to you are well established, well known. CGI is on it. Andrew, Ashish, and with the support of Cassandra are on it. I mean, they're not secrets. There's no surprises here, and the good news is that people are working very, very hard to make the project successful. That's always important. So that's the good news. With that, there's, of course, two things that we're concerned about. So two areas in our dashboard that are red. And our dashboard is primarily red and yellow, by the way. There isn't a lot of green on there. And the two are related. This one, software development, that's kind of the technical work of building the system. So it's not training, it's not testing, but it's the nuts and bolts of how to build the system. This has been read on our report for 4 or 5 months. It's been an area that the project has struggled. At this point, a lot of the software development is done, and now the software development is very much linked to the issue around testing. Testing is finding bugs or defects, and the software development group has to fix them. So we still have concerns around the throughput, how quickly these bugs are being fixed, and the work that's required to make the system successfully pass through contractor testing. So it's been an issue for a while on our list. It's taken several months longer than I think the original plan was, and it's now moving into the part where it's tightly coupled with testing, which is our second issue.
Karen?
So you understand why it's been in red, what the issues are, and they've been able to be remedied?
To the large extent with software development, they have been, yes. Now, they've been remedied in part by making the schedule, adjusting the schedule to allow more time for this work to be done.
Which goes back to Graham's point, we're more interested in quality than we are dates.
And
Is that a-
I
is
think
that-
that's the right decision, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely. So one of the things I always try to do when we're in these forums is update you as of yesterday, because some of this stuff gets dated, but the mitigations are all underway. The project team is working hard. This process has taken longer, which has burned up the contingency that Graham mentioned, but it's being addressed and it's certainly getting better. So that's red issue for me, number one.
Go ahead, here.
A follow-up?
Yes, sir.
Just in terms of context,
Yep.
is it within the norm to expect for this to occur at this time? And is the risk really greater to, for lack of better terms, rush to move to deadlines? Is that a greater risk long-term to a project such as this? And it's red, but it's to be expected. It's within the realm of the norm for this to have these types of glitches at this time, slowing things down, and moving deadlines is the appropriate thing for, I'm just trying to get some context.
Yeah, sure. And so for both of these issues, but especially the software development, there's been no surprise. There's always issues. There's always conflict. There's always problems, and that's why schedules have contingency in them. And the schedule that CGI was working under had contingency. They had a certain amount of time allocated to things that would come up, unknowns. The reality, I think, of the situation now between the software development taking longer and now testing taking longer, and this is something Graham mentioned, I think there's very little contingency left. So the red risk indicates that there may be a hard choice coming between going live in March and, kind of standing up to what you're saying and saying, quality is most important. We got to make sure we get this thing right. The testing is taking longer than anybody thought, and the risk is that the March deadline, the March go live for the first release is at risk.
On budget quality. So what you're saying is we're pushing up against the time issue, potentially pushing up budget, as a result, potentially budget issues, and there may be a tough decision somewhere in the near future for us to address.
That's correct.
Thank you.
That's correct. Yeah, yeah.
We had 16 weeks of contingency built into this schedule, and I think that the last was reported is that we're 10 weeks into that 16 weeks, and we're still holding at that. Now, we've been working with CGI to try to adjust the number of defects that they've been encountering. The defects aren't showstoppers. It's what they expect. They're just more than they anticipated. So what they've done is they've shifted resources to try to really focus on achieving functional rollout 1 on time. So that has helped. We're still at that 10-week threshold at this point. There's going to be some other triggers that will decide whether or not, pardon, don't like that term because of the comp discussion, but, you know, we'll know if we'll hit some other, you know, timeframes and achieving and whether or not it's going to push the schedule out any further.
And John, I kind of cut you off to go to Cassandra. Did you have anything else you were going to add with Harry?
No.
Alrighty, then I have another question. Karen?
So all the while this project is going on, I forget what the name of it is, but
Pension solution.
Pension Solution Project is going on. Our members are still getting the benefits, still being able to do all the things that they do, and so then Pension Solution Project is working in like a little tunnel or somewhere out there? Okay. And then,
Behind a very big wall.
okay, but our members are still getting what they are supposed to be getting?
Yeah, nothing's changed in the field,
Okay.
period.
Yeah, the
Yep.
current system start is still going to be operating, and we're going to have both, once we get the pension administration system working, you know, they're going to be running in parallel
Okay.
for a while until we can transfer
So
the
then
data.
it's kind of a phase-in.
It's a big, long,
Okay,
That's the term change in management that I've learned as a trustee, like helping go from an old system to a new system and all the staff. And that's a.
right,
that's a-
okay, okay.
Yeah,
challenge.
and I do apologize for, especially for the new members of the board, it's hard to come in midstream, but there's different releases of the software. So the first release is in March, that's the first
Right.
bit of functionality, which we call FR1, and that's the first piece that people are focusing
That's
on.
what you're calling go live?
Yeah, it's the first go live. There's another one that's even bigger, that's out another couple of years, and that'll be another piece of new
See, that's what's
functionality.
scary. We're
Yeah,
getting
yes, ma'am.
exhausted on that.
we're not doing a, you know, big bang approach where we get the
Right.
system up and then we turn it on and turn the other one off. We'll know when we
Yeah.
have incremental phased in successes before we move on to the next one or go
Exactly.
into. And I mean, that's some of the stuff that we'll talk to answer some of Nora's question about, you know, what's the crisis response in some of these issues. It's, you know, hopefully we won't have the big, huge crisis because we will know incrementally with the phased rollouts whether or not we're successful.
And to fix those issues on our way.
Thank you,
Yeah, absolutely.
thank you.
And just to build on Cassandra's point, that in itself is a very important risk mitigation technique. Is you
Absolutely.
just put a little bit out, because you're gonna learn so much, and that is exactly the plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Oh, Paul?
Oh,
Could you explain to somebody what FR1 will do? What functionality are we going to get when we get functional release 1?
I'm gonna defer to the sheesh. You're probably better at that.
So FR1, we're going to the employer reporting. So what employer is reporting right now will move into the different portal. That's the new portal.
The employers will be making their reports to us through a different portal.
Yeah, different portals.
Yeah, so we will be replacing the secure employer website with a new contribution portal through which the employers will submit their contributions to CalSTRS.
And that will be, the expectation is that it will be functional.
I mean, that one day they're gonna go from the old system and then in March, they're gonna go to the or whenever the date is, they're gonna go to the new system.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And so obviously there's training and everything that's gonna go on.
So we have a
beforehand.
4-month
Okay.
user acceptance test and training and all.
That's what FR1
Yeah.
is, thank you.
When we come in July, we can show you a sort of the Gantt chart of all the overlapping activities that are happening with regards to testing and training before we get to that go-live date.
Cool. All righty.
Good.
John?
Yeah, I think we've covered this, but system acceptance testing. Oh, thank you, Graham, see, partnership. So system acceptance testing is the second of our two biggest concerns. It's taking more time, it's more complicated, and so this is another one that we're gonna watch very carefully. This may be a good lead-in to my comments around the governance, unless there's other questions about this, because
I don't have anybody, I don't think, that
Anyone
wants
else?
to speak. Joy, did you, okay, all right.
So Dana, you had asked about the PwC presentation around governance. So I have a couple observations, but I wanted to make sure I made my comments with these two gentlemen at the table, because they are a big part of what my thoughts are. First and foremost, I love the board. I love your questions. I love you asking us what questions to ask. I love your interest. That's critical to the success of a project. I also appreciate, as PwC said, your role is difficult. It's a very large project. It's very complicated. Technology moves at, lightning speeds. I mean, I personally been doing nothing but IT my entire career. I started as a coder. I did software development. I did design. I was a project leader. I became a project manager. I ultimately was a partner with a large firm. I've done this my whole life, and it's not easy. I've dealt and helped a lot of boards, and it's people like you that make these things successful. So I do have a couple thoughts on questions to ask and things like that. First and foremost, so two observations from PwC. One was they made a point to talk about owners and outside consultants and the use of staff. And I think it's very important for you to realize that you have experts. You have a business owner to my right and a technology owner to my left. These are your staff. These are your people. I'm all for consultants, but at the end of the day, it's your organization, your operations, and your technology leadership that are going to be so important in making this project successful. So when you think about governance, and obviously you're limited with the number of people on your board and how you can get more people, it's a very, very complicated project, and it's going to be very difficult, I think, for you to operate at the level you need to operate without relying incredibly, just like I'm sure you do and on these two gentlemen. The third cog in that wheel is CGI. They are your business partner. I know they're here. They are a world-class systems integration house. They have brought resources here to make this project successful for you. So those are the three entities that I think you have currently at your disposal to figure out what questions to ask and to ask them and let them ask those questions so that, because they're your experts. What happens in technology is critical, and it changes so fast you can't possibly keep up. And how this is going to affect the field is the most important. And I'm a techie, but it's not techie, it's this. So these two gentlemen, under Cassandra's leadership, are your go-tos. So that's one thing. And the fact that they're coming back in July and doing a presentation for you is critical, absolutely critical. So that was one thing. The second observation I had was the questions to ask. And again, I've worked with a lot of boards, and I'm a simple guy, right? I can boil it down to real simple stuff. I think the questions that you've been offered are good. PwC must have had 36 questions. Now, IVNV is unique in its ability, I think, to offer a different perspective, a different viewpoint. We're not mired in the project as to make it, in the details, we're able to get up above the fray sometimes. We create dashboards, they're all available in our reports. I would suggest that you ask one question. I would suggest that you ask your staff and your CGI vendors and your leadership, what is your confidence that this project will be successful? What is your confidence that we will make FR1, the March deadline? What is your confidence that we'll make this FR2 2 years later? All the other questions are important, but it's so technical and moves so fast, it's hard. You can have a long conversation about any of those topics, and it may be difficult to really get to the meat of it. At the end of the day, I would suggest it's one question. And the follow-up is, how can I help? What can the board do? And that's why I mentioned the BD, because that came up, and the board said, what can we do? Well, you can expedite, you can give us, not us, you can give CalSTRS management and leadership the ability to sign the contract between board meetings. And that's what you did, and that helped incredibly. So what's your confidence that we're going to make these dates? And what can I do as the board to improve that? So that's my counsel, and
Thank you, John.
thank you.
Graham?
So, a couple of different thoughts. One thing I took away from the session this morning, which I thought was very interesting, good dialogue. Talking about there were two layers, I think, to it. One was the strategic role of the board in governing IT at an organizational level, and I'll come to that part last. The other part was around projects. How do you do oversight of projects, and what kind of questions? The point that John made. And I thought it was interesting, and actually I thought it was a good thing that when I looked at that list of questions, I think you've had many of those conversations already. In terms of who's governing this, who is making decisions. Questions about data conversion. That the whole reason the data prep project exists is because you were talking about that a long time ago, and I think you've paid more attention to that than a lot of other organizations have, and I hope it's going to pay dividends for you. So. Change management, another one of those topics you've had dialogue around. So I think that was a good, it was a good sort of reinforcing function in a way. When I saw those questions, they were thinking from their experience, yes, these are questions that are important, and you've had some dialogue, around many of them. Not to say they're all resolved, but you've been thinking in those ways, and it's part of the reason that I felt that the questions that I was putting towards you are much more granular, because many of these larger questions have been addressed in one form or another. So you have the luxury, if you like, of getting a little bit more tactical. The other point, I think, was maybe even the more interesting part of the conversation with me was about the role of the board in strategic IT governance. And IT governance is an interesting topic because it's so deeply baked into everything that organizations do right now that it's hard really to just do IT governance, because you can't have a conversation about enterprise risks without considering IT. And Pension Solution may be an IT project, but it's not just an IT project, it's a business initiative. And you can't treat it just as an IT topic. So this question of, should we be looking at all IT in one forum, for example? It's an interesting idea, but you can't just talk about, only talk about those things in that forum, because it bleeds into so many other areas. One thing I did think was interesting was the concept of a dashboard, of how do you, at a board strategic level, how do you monitor the use of IT assets and the value of IT assets for your organization? That I think would be a really useful conversation to have. It's above and beyond any individual project, but it's getting to that question of what do you want to do with IT? How much money are you spending on it, and how do you measure the value associated with it? It's a pretty tricky thing, but it's pretty important to many organizations now, because IT is just, it's not just a thing that sits in a data center anymore. It's part of almost everything that you do. So I think that was a pretty interesting dialogue.
All right. Thank you. I really appreciate your candidness and your willingness to go ahead and talk to us about that. Brian?
I'm sorry, I don't usually ask questions from the back bench, but I'm even more simple than John. So what I've heard today is we've had two knowledgeable consultants come up and say, we have reports and they're both in yellow. So what I'd like to hear on your behalf is a specific, detailed report on what it's going to take to move those to green. You've got the report, you've got some of the recommendations, you've got some of the findings, but put them on the spot and say, okay, what specific activities do we need to move those to green? Because both of your reports are yellow.
So I'll start, just because we actually went through an exercise with Cassandra and Ashish and Andrew just 6 weeks ago, maybe it was. We had a get to green, what is it? And we had a table that we put together. So, okay, what is the gap? And in a few areas, the project was able to close the gap. And some of those things actually did flip to green in our report, because some of the things we said, like, these is where we see risks or deficiencies, they were resolved. There are, we haven't done another version of that, to your question, Brian, based on the most recent information. I mean, if I was going to sort of offer one thing up right now, the most significant thing is, to your question, John, the confidence on the ability to make the implementation for FR1 successfully without compromising those things we were talking about earlier. And that's where there's doubt because of the challenges around testing, and we just don't really know how well that's going to go. And that, to me, is the number one piece for the whole project.
So I think when we are going through this last 6 or 8 weeks, we coming out, the findings are, red, yellow plus or something. We came up with this, what is the finding and what is the mitigation plan? What is the treatment plan we can do and how soon we can do? And I think we challenge our leadership in the project management side. We had a numerous conversation with CGI that what they can do to make it what we are eating up the 10 weeks, and we have a 16 weeks, how we can work hard. And for last 2-3 weeks, I'm hearing now that every other day I'm getting an email that, okay, in this testing, we put more resources here. Let's talk about Monday. We are eating up some time. So, it's just it's a healthy dialogue, and sometimes it's very, those kind of conversations very difficult to have, but I think it's necessary to have. So we are, and even Cassandra is meeting with them, their leadership, so.
Can I just follow up on the green, yellow thing? I just want to make sure I've got my, because I'm assuming many projects stay in yellow
Oh, yeah.
to the finish line.
Right.
And so,
If they're lucky.
if they're lucky, yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to get hung up that necessarily, that's, well, every resource has to be applied to push it to green. I mean, is the project of this highly complex, hundreds of millions of dollars, is that atypical to have much of the project in a yellow-green status, or is that typical?
No, it's not unusual. I mean, it's almost actually unheard of to see a project that's sort of green.
That's what I thought. I just want to leave the board with the impression that there's a
right.
green report card, and that's what every resource is dedicated to get to.
There's a reason, I mean, you can get a little bit, you don't want to sort of argue about semantics, but
Yeah.
there's a reason, and we've chosen in the way we do our ratings, this sort of yellow plus, yellow minus thing.
Yep.
Which is a little bit, it's splitting hairs a little bit, but we want to give this sense of, are you sort of doing the things to get you out of green, or are you slipping back towards?
Right.
red? I mean, that's sort of the difference.
That's how I view the funding ratio.
if you-
That's very, very similar to whole thinking, actually.
Yeah.
Good, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like we're not 100% funded here, but we want to make sure the momentum is going to that
In the right
direction.
direction.
That's how I feel. We're probably yellow on the funding scheme right now.
And we have to realize this is a very complex project, and I don't think we can turn in July, we say green plus, and then we say, okay, yellow plus, right? So I think we understand that what is the risk we are taking, what kind of decision we are making, and what kind of risk we are taking. So I think it's all balancing out. It's just not about Cassandra and I think Harry and also everybody mentioned quality is the first thing, and we are looking towards that one.
I'll just say one other thing before I hand it over to John, just to your question. I mean, the thing I think we're trying to avoid collectively is, I mean, it's what I call watermelon projects. They're green on the outside, and you cut an inch in, they're red all the way through.
That's a good one.
Right? And you see too many of those. So this whole effort of transparency is to avoid that kind of stuff. And, the colors are the colors of what they are.
Yeah.
But it's raising up those issues, so if things don't just sort of get hidden, and then all of a sudden it's green,
Right,
red.
right.
Which happens too often.
And this happened in a lot of, here in Sacramento, in a lot of projects, all green, and just boom. So I think we are very much careful in there.
Yeah, we're definitely not doing that. Let me just add one other comment to Brian, because I think it's a good question. You don't want a bunch of consultants saying it's yellow and then leaving, right? So I'm glad IPOC is doing their get to green, plans. Just so you know, our reports come out, we issue a report every month. It's about 150 pages long. There's currently about 50 findings, which are statements of fact, things that are absolutely happening on the project for which there's no disagreement. And then each one of those is tied to risks, and each risk is tied to recommendations. And we track those recommendations month to month. So there's probably, I'm going to guess, 200 recommendations in our report each month, and we track them. So if the project is successful and meets our, fulfills the conditions of the recommendation, we close it. And if there's additional things we think they need to do, we open it. So the project has been very good about tracking those recommendations, and we keep that dialogue going, because we, like IPOC, are very, ultimately, our objective is not to have a green report. It's to have a successful project.
Yeah.
And that's definitely our focus, so. But thank you.
On a regular, as we get these updates, I'd take John's suggestion, the level of confidence question, I think is very pertinent, and we'd be wise to take his guidance and counsel, and I personally will be asking that. I also appreciate Jack's comment and Brian's comment, relative to the green, yellow, red light,
green light kind of thing going on. But I do think there is some merit to understanding the momentum and what it would take for the momentum to go one way or the other in terms of, in a simple, high level, we're at yellow, it's not uncommon to be at yellow. Generally speaking, this is where we would need to be going for the momentum to be moving towards the green, and these are the red flags or the concerns that could be moving us in the wrong direction. So we have that momentum, a sense of that momentum flow. I do like the watermelon, so I now have budget dust, Maggie Ellis, and the watermelon. Green on the outside, slice it an inch, and it's all red. So those are two good ones, budget, dust, and watermelons. But so, helpful. So we'll take that question, level of confidence, and also momentum around green, yellow, because I think there can be a false sense of security when we see green. For me, there's a false sense of security that I automatically see, right? And then there's a false, heightened level of potential anxiety and fear if I see a red, when in fact it may not be either. I just need some explanation. And I don't think I'm alone.
Cassandra?
This is just kind of the wrap up, I think, what everybody's already said, because you guys said it also so well already. Yeah, I think in July, that's the perfect question to ask. What's your level of confidence around hitting functional rollout 1? And moving on to 2 and 3, because we're discussing those conversations right now, and there's going to be some critical milestones that we either achieve or we're not going to be able to achieve to have our level of confidence, because that's what we are discussing with CGI, is our level of confidence in FFR1 is, we're where we are, and it'll either get better or worse between now and then we're going to be discussing too, because that's what we talk about is when I talk to Ashish and Andrew is what are you worried about, and Robin, what are the things that you're worried about, and we want to make sure that you understand what our confidence level is, and we'll have a lot better idea, I think, in July, hitting some of these milestones and seeing where we are in the contingency and the likelihood of us getting to those target dates.
Sharon?
So one last question.
And then Paul?
Second to last question, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
absolutely.
So John, I really appreciate, this gets a little wonky for me, and it's late, and so there's a lot of talking, and I'm focused on your one question, which is really helpful. I guess I wanted to ask you, what's an acceptable answer for us to hear from staff in July when we ask that question? Because I was trying to put myself in the staff's shoes, and do you know what I'm saying? What's a response that would give us a sense of, oh, okay, things are on track? Is it a percentage? Is it a color of the stoplight?
Again, simple, right? I would do, what's your level of confidence, high, medium, low? Are we going to make March 3rd? Or is it March, whatever, March 2018, thank you. High, medium, low, don't get fancy, don't get a lot of words, techies are great about speaking techie, so don't let that happen.
All righty.
Techies like me.
Paul?
So I like the question, but I'm going to drill down a little bit on that question, because so we ask the question and she says, hi. I don't know whether to trust him on that or not. I don't know whether, I mean, what do we, that's why it seems, see, that's why, for me as a board member,
Sure.
asking questions like that, I don't know, I need somebody like you, or like Graham, or like Larry with internal audits, or somebody who knows more than me to give me a sense as to whether he's not just shining me on. I don't want to ask that question
Just show
month
me
after
not-
month
just
after
tell me.
month after month, and it's high, whoops, the world has crashed. So I understand the question, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Doesn't get me there to the point where I'm doing my oversight
No,
responsibility.
and I'm not suggesting you don't ask the 5 questions that Graham mentioned, or maybe even a half a dozen of the ones that PwC asked. But I would personally start with, what is your confidence? And it's not just one person, it's each of the leadership team. And if anybody is anything other than high, then the follow-up is, okay, talk to us. What is it? What's the problem? What's the issue? So regardless of where it shows up on these other questions, you don't have 30 questions of hoping you hit the thing that they're worried about. I think it's looking at them all, what's your level of confidence, and how can we help? If everybody goes across the board, these 4 people and the 3 against the back wall, if we all say hi, then I'm not sure at your level, there's a lot of fear.
Conspiracy going on.
Yeah.
And then what we ask is, what evidence do you have that makes you feel that
I think
comfortable?
it's because they should not be having different assessments of what the level of confidence is, and they would have the same perspective, I think. I mean, they would be in the same ballpark. They would, so that's, if Ashish was high and these were low, then we wouldn't be bringing that level of confidence to you. We would be figuring out those disconnects and understanding them. But we're talking about the same things, and we're talking about all of the same risks, and we're all asking each other, what, from your perspective, what things, aren't we hitting? What are you worried about, so.
Graham?
I just want maybe a perspective on it. And it came up a little bit with the board governance conversation this morning. But it's this question, to what extent are you delegating the responsibility to ask these questions to us, right? And you're expecting us to be going out and asking these questions on your behalf,
Absolutely.
right? And if we don't like the answers, we're gonna come to you and say, hey, so there's, it's not that you're expected to be able to dig in behind the details and so on, but, because we're there to do the sniff test, right, on what's being said. But I do think there's value, and having seen a number of other projects and a number of other organizations, not necessarily CalSTRS, but there's value in having people look you in the eye and say it directly to your face, even if you're not going to be doing a lot of the fact-checking. That creates a useful dynamic, just to get people to think about accountability and ownership and all those kinds of things.
So
All right. Go ahead, Ashish.
I just want to add in, if I'm coming here, I'm saying my confidence is high. Before that, I will ask John, I say, how much confidence you are with the quality is produced by project and the CGI team. I will put them in spot that, what is the quality we are getting.
All right. Very good. So Larry, you get to be the last person to weigh in?
Okay, thank you. I agree with all the comments that are made. I'm not going to try to repeat anything here, but I just wanted to share, we've had some conversations about 3 lines of defense in our risk committee here, and this is actually a perfect example in my mind where you have your executive team in front of you, management, who's providing you with a level of assurance, right? And you have your IVMV and your IPOC consultants who would function in a second line of defense, right? Because they play a more independent role, right? And they're providing you with some assurance as well. Well, audit services provides a different level of assurance, right? Which is the third line of defense, okay? And so this is kind of an example of that where you can have more confidence, if you will, in the statements that are being made when you're hearing it from management, when you're hearing it from IPOC, and you're hearing it from your third line of defense as well. So it's important to understand from audit's perspective, the nature of our work, which is really an independent objective assurance function, right? And we serve as eyes and ears of the board, right? And so in our role, I've kind of taken kind of a strategic approach to this of without trying to, interfere with any of the other work that's going on or duplicate any of the other work, and try to determine where are the key critical areas that audits should be looking at in providing assurance to the board. And so basically, when I think of a project of this magnitude, and I've lived in a couple of these myself, and so there's always the governance aspect that's really critical, the testing that's being done with regards to data conversion or the functional design requirements or even the functional user acceptance testing. And those are kind of key areas there. Internal controls is another area that's really important. And in the internal controls, there's application controls, there's security issues. I haven't heard a lot about the security issues here, but there's access roles to consider and things like that. And there's another vendor actually that's working just strictly kind of on security issues. And I coordinate with them and get a report from them as well and understand their role. Change management, the training is another critical function of it. And then the communications plan, right? How are we addressing not only communications to you, but to our stakeholders, right? And so those are kind of the 5 key areas that we feel that we can focus on. You have your IVMV and IPOC that they've described so many moving pieces and it's just going 100 miles an hour every day. And that's what they're involved with that. And so they provide you with good oversight and guidance of that, but we're going to provide assurance, and it's just a different dimension, that third line of defense, on these kind of key areas for you. So the conversation today, I thought, was really underscored the relevancy of our discussion yesterday in the Audits and Risk Management Committee, because there are several areas that I noted that we're already kind of I illustrated to you the risks that we've either audited or that are in progress. And to kind of connect a couple of those dots there, we took a strategic approach to this 3 years ago when we knew that this project was coming, and we said, let's look at some of the foundational things. So one of the first things that we took a look at was kind of our project management office and the capabilities there, and as we prepare for our big project of this nature. And we did an audit of that. And then we looked at IT infrastructure and how are we, managing our infrastructure, our configuration management, our change management, those types of activities in the organization. And then we also looked at third-party data provider, and we've provided those audits to the committee. And the third-party data provider oversight is important because we're going to host this system, and we'll have an off-site host, and we need to know what kind of service level agreement we have in place, what kind of monitoring oversight we have in place. And then we have some current audits that are in progress that I think are really relevant. And I mentioned pension solution governance, and then the pre-conversion work that we're doing on the data conversion efforts, right? And so it gives you a third look, if you will, that third line of defense look on some assurance there. And also in the plan that we had proposed for next year was the pension solution controls. And then we also identified a couple of other risks that we said, hey, at this point, we don't have the resources. IVMV and IPOC have some large teams that are working on this every day, but we did identify in there kind of looking at application development and maintenance of the new solution, things like that. So I think there's some real, relevant conversations in those audits that we're doing that really support the project as well. And then from kind of an oversight perspective, I'm able to participate on the steering committee. I think that was outlined in the plan, and attend meetings as well. We have staff that are participating in JAD sessions. And then, of course, reviewing their reports and having discussions. And so if I was hearing things kind of at the project level, sitting on the steering committee and reviewing the risk management reports and things like that, and it's inconsistent with what you're hearing here, then, as your assurance provider, I'm going to have some discussions with you about it. And so it provides the board that additional dimension, if you will, from the 3 lines of defense concept that we've been talking about on some independent and objective assurance. And so one thing I've learned is that the sooner we get involved, the better. And so, it's helpful to have us in there, because what we don't want is...
You've had some experiences in this area, haven't you, other places?
Yes. the sooner the better. And if there's problems, yeah. And if there's problems, we don't want anybody to come in and say, hey, well, where were the auditors? But the approach that we're taking here with regards to the governance that's in place, your IVMV and your IPOC consultant, it's great for board oversight, and to have all three of those dimensions in place is the right thing for the board in driving success of the project.
All right. Thank you. Great discussion, guys. I really appreciate it. So if I could have the mics move their way to audits and benefits and services, board governance. Good Lord, I need comp too. Okay, so our next item is the consent agenda for the action item, or action items that are coming out of committee reports. So Paul, do you have your action item for audits?
Yes, by direction of the Audit and Risk Management Committee, I move to approve Audit Services 2017 6-month audit plan.
Did you have the mic? Did that get in?
I probably didn't. Got the mic here and everything.
There you go, thank you.
Again, by direction of the Audit and Risk Management Committee.
Approve Audit Services 2017 6-month audit plan.
All right, so it's been moved by the committee. It doesn't need a second. Are there any questions? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? That was it, Paul?
That's all I was told to read.
Super. If you could move that microphone, hand that to Lynn. Sharon, do you want Lynn to do hers first, or are you ready to do?
Am I supposed to read this, or?
Yeah, there's something there for action.
Okay. Oh, I see it.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh.
We'll go
There we go.
benefits and services.
So for benefits and services, by direction of the Benefits and Services Committee, I move to approve the adoption as a plan amendment of the tolerance amount of $10 for dispensing with the processing of benefit. Am I reading the right thing? Okay.
It's we're lagged one meeting.
Okay, I'm like, did we? Okay, thank you. I'm like, I don't remember talking about this, but I'm really tired, so it could be. Just wanted to thank you, Brian, for keeping us. Okay. I move to approve the adoption as a plan amendment of the tolerance amount of $10 for dispensing with the processing of benefit payments, annuity payments, or any other payment or collection of benefit overpayments, annuity overpayments, or any other overpayments paid to a member, participant, or beneficiary consistent with the board's authority under Ed Code Section 22404 to be effective July 1st, 2018. So that's right, 18, not this year, next year.
All right, are there any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? And the motion is passed. All right, board governance.
By direction of the Board Governance Committee, I move to adopt the following changes to the Board Policy Manual. 1, a new policy review provision in Section 500. 2, a new delegation of authority review timeline in Section 200C. 3, revision to Section 500A to change the elections of the Board Chair and Vice Chair from April to May. And 4, revision to Section 600C to update the language concerning fiduciary counsel.
All right. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? That motion is also passed. And for the public's information, the other information that's coming out of these committees goes into our written record as something that is already written. And so that it's added to it. We don't necessarily read all that into the record. So by direction of the Compensation Committee, I move to adopt the incentive weighting for the CEO to be 15% for the total fund performance, 50% for personal performance, and 35% for long-term strategic performance. The incentive weighting for the CFO will be 20% for the total fund performance, 50% for personal performance, and 30% for long-term strategic performance. I actually have two motions.
I think that, just that first one, I think you might have said CEO, but
Yeah, that's
it's.
what I
it's
I'm
actually-
sorry, it's COO.
CO, yeah.
It's COO and CFO. And do you want to move these two motions separately, or can we do them together?
Together.
Okay, and then the second motion is, by direction of the Compensation Committee, I move to adopt the technical housekeeping revisions to Section 700 of the Teachers Retirement Board Policy Manual, compensation policy, and to its administrative procedures. there any questions? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? All righty, that has passed. So moving right along on our agenda, approval of the minutes, board education, and contracts requiring board approval. Those are all consent items. You have a new education piece that was at your seat. There are only a couple of us that have signed up for CII. CII will be in San Diego. It's right after our offsite, so if you would like to go to CII, please make sure you get a hold of Danielle. We can get that on the approval list for July. Jack, you also have
Just,
to-
if you wouldn't mind adding Nora right now to the list, she just got on at the last minute. She'd like to be added today.
Oh, to CII?
Yeah,
Okay,
she
thank
actually
you.
saw that too, yeah.
All right.
If you wouldn't
And
mind.
so Nora would be added onto that, and anyone else can add on to that, and we can approve that in July.
I did want to flag the training that Harry's listed for in, where's that, actually, now that I look at it? Is that on there, Harry, the NACD training? Yep. Oh, yeah, so Harry's going to this director training, it's, and I'm going as well. We thought we would try this out. It's, I guess I said in the past, Ann Sheen and I have been members of NACD for a long time and have done things. I was on the chapter board for a while, and I think it's good stuff. So we were gonna go through their professionalism board training. And if it's good, that might be a nice companion piece to Rotman. It's also, in the US and.
Right.
Can I ask you a quick question, Jack? Is our system members, or do we?
No, we priced a board membership, unless you're doing stuff, it isn't cost effective, but if you do, you're only getting a discount on a conference. So to the extent we start seeing more, we can get a board membership, but it was pretty pricey. So right now, I have one and Ann has one, and we'll,
Current stuff about.
they do, I've been adding it, just to see if any of you, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you ought to dip your toe in there and see if it's something that it's totally corporate. It's a very different orientation. And the nice thing about Rotman was it was in your home court.
Yeah. And Sharon and I attended the NC PERS Module 1 and 2 board training. I felt it was very good. I have materials here. I'll make sure that I have them at the next few meetings if you want to take a look at that. We are planning on doing Module 3 and 4 in San Antonio. That's on the list. After you complete all 4 modules, there is a test, 100 questions, and I think it has seemed very thorough so far. A lot of it we already knew because we do a lot of fiduciary training for ourselves, but I thought it was a really great opportunity.
They do the test after you've taken all 4?
You have to take all 4.
Oh.
And they only offer them, they offer 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 in the spring, and then they offer it again in the fall.
That's interesting. Is there transparency to your score, or?
What do you mean? Like,
I'm
you
not
wanna-
showing you what we score.
But GGA is actually
Yeah.
helping to do the.
It was very good. So Luis's company's involved in that. It was very good. So I have the materials, and I'm gonna share those with Amy and also with Jack. So I'll put a pitch in for San Antonio in the fall.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent items. Moved by Sharon, seconded by Irina. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Hearing none, we're good. The motion passes. Steve, do we have anything? I didn't capture anything. I'm out to lunch today. So did you capture things that we wanted to have, that were referred to us for the board's decision?
Well, Steve looks at that, when you got into the charter school area,
Yeah.
there was quite a bit of asks, or quite a lot of asks. And I thought Jack summed it up by saying we would come back with an outline.
Yeah.
And so I kind of said to Steve, take a breath. And so we hope a lot of that's going to be reflected in what you come
Absolutely.
back.
And we were planning on doing more on charter schools, so I think
Yes.
that fits into it.
So, thank you, Brian. So aside from that item, I did pick up 2.
Okay.
The first on information, or on item 6, I had a request for a review of the reimbursement or stipend for members appointed to the board by the governor.
Oh, yes. That was for me. How did I forget that? Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Of course. And then on item 9, I had a request sort of for a high-level recap on the Pension Solutions project, as well as information or also recap on what's the crisis plan if something were to go wrong on Go Live.
Super. Does anybody have any others?
Okay. New business, review of information requests, draft agenda. Jack, do you want to talk about the agenda? I think that, it sounds like we've kind of beefed up that July agenda a little bit. I think we ought to plan on having a 3-day meeting.
Yeah, just after the meeting, the timing of it. No, I think obviously, well, in the technology ones, we need to redo those times. I think those seem a little inadequate based on what we talked about today. And then we did move your fiduciary training there, so you've got an hour with Mr. Lederman, and Brian's gonna do your annual Bagley-Keene training in there. And should we move them up, the technology items, like the controller had suggested earlier in the day?
Sure.
Try a different approach rather than
Sure.
flipping our
Absolutely.
momentum. Let's see if that works.
Let's play with it, so.
Better, I'll do that. And again, we didn't really talk about it, but item number 3 is the board officer and committee delegation. Brian's putting that together, but we just wanted to, you've delegated a few areas of the organization and you got it in pockets around
Yep.
things. We want to bring it together so we all know what you've delegated to, really to Dana and Sharon primarily. Okay.
Harry?
Just put it out there. I'm wiped out.
Yeah, this is killing us.
This is a lot for me to process in 2 days. And I don't know what the right answer is, but I'm just gonna I'm gonna speak my truth. I'm wiped out, and some of these topics, in and of themselves, are like a half-a-day meeting. Could literally be a half-a-day meeting, and given the magnitude. So I don't know what the right answer is, but I think we have to find a way where we can be at our highest, maybe it's me, maybe I just don't have that much left in me.
Look at me, Harry. Look at me right
Maybe it's
now.
me.
Harry.
Maybe I'm too
Harry,
soft.
Look at me here.
And actually, Harry, that's something that Amy and I have already been talking about.
fresh.
And
look like you're just ready to keep going.
and we'll definitely be discussing about when we do the board self-evaluation, we're definitely gonna have that conversation too, so. We're always taking a look at how long it takes us to do stuff, so. But I think we need to count on July being 3 days. I don't think anybody here wants to go 2 days to 6. Alrighty. And they're both about the same, so we started at 9 yesterday. Alrighty, that sounds good. Any opportunities or anyone from the public that'd like to take the opportunity to speak? All right. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.